Let's answer some questions. In a previous video, I asked for your questions, and today, I'm going to answer some of them. I've been a beekeeper for a little over 500 days. That's about 2 seasons. I keep my bees in Massachusetts. We have really cold winters here. I use all Langstroth equipment, and I'm basically still a beginner. So keep all that in mind when I'm answering these questions. When I opened up for questions, I got a pretty big response, and the questions varied wildly. So I divided this up into 4 sections. And today, we're going to talk about gear. All right, this is a beekeeping Q&A, but the first question is about bears. I had several questions about the electric fence, wondering, is that to keep bears out? And yes, it is exactly to keep bears out. We have bears that walk across this field regularly. My neighbor who lives over the hill sees bears very often. There's sort of a valley on the other side over there. And let's just say there is evidence of bear activity often out in the field. You have to watch your step around here. So yes, the fence is a deterrent. It is not going to stop a bear, but it could deter a bear. Somebody also asked about the charger. Yes. It is a Parmac Solar Pack 6 charger, solar powered, and it gives off something like 7,000 to 8,000 volts. It's not a continuous electric fence, it's like a pulse. Hear that tick? When it ticks, the fence is electric. So the idea is, of course, a bear could just go right through this wire, but if a bear's nosing around with his wet nose in the early morning hours looking for honey, he's gonna... It's on. All right, next, should I buy a beekeeping suit? I don't think you need a whole suit. I went with the jacket, the long pants, the beekeeping hat, and the veil. This jacket this is a vented jacket that I got. The link is in the description. I bought this jacket. It came with a fencing style hood. I didn't like that hood. So I bought the square hood separate, and it zips on to the jacket. If the zippers don't line up exactly, it comes with the other side of the zipper here on the jacket, and you can sew this onto your suit and then zip this onto your vented jacket. No matter where you live, whether it's hot or cold or whatever, you want a vented jacket. Get the vented jacket, trust me. Last year I used a plastic hat, the cheapest one you can get, and it was a fine hat, but the band inside was very uncomfortable. So I upgraded this year to this hat. The link is also in the description. This is vented, it's very lightweight, it's very comfortable, and I think it looks pretty cool. I would recommend long pants when you're beekeeping. Bees are not going to be stinging your legs. They do, however, crawl up inside your pants occasionally. You can feel them from the ground crawling up. So you can put your pants inside your socks if you really want to, because the bees just sort of on the ground, they kind of crawl up sometimes, but it's not that big of a deal. Now, as far as gloves, I wore gloves the first couple of days, and then I started trying to not use gloves. I would recommend learning how to not use gloves. I found when I wore gloves, I was a lot more klutzy, I was a lot more clumsy, I killed way more bees. Because you can't feel the frames in your hands, and they're just thick, and if you're still new and you're doing something where you have to really reach deep in your hive and there's just a lot of bees around and you're just not comfortable yet, then yes, you can wear some gloves. But when you're doing general inspections, when you're picking up frames, I highly recommend learning how to keep bees without gloves. Getting a sting on the hand is not that bad. I still have never been stung in the face because I always have the veil on when I'm in the bee yard. I don't really want to get stung in the face. I'm not going to tell you not to purchase gloves because they are good to have in certain situations, but try to learn how to not use them. A lot of questions about the basic terminology and the types of boxes and frames that I use. Keep in mind all these answers pertain to Langstroth hives. This is a medium-sized frame. This is a deep size frame. As you can see, the deep is bigger than the medium. So the larger deep size frames go in the deep boxes. These are deep boxes. Medium frames, medium boxes. So both of my Russian hives are in deep boxes. My Italians are in mediums. Now deep boxes and medium boxes can also come in different widths. So this is an 8 frame deep box. There are 8 of these frames across in this box. So my Italians are in medium boxes, but there are 10 frames in the mediums. There are 8 frames in the deeps. You can get 10 frame deeps and you can get 8 frame mediums. It's really whatever your preference is. If you like lifting 100-pound boxes of honey, get yourself 10 frame deeps. A full 8 frame deep is going to weigh 70 or 80 pounds. 10 frame deep, we're talking 100 pounds. The mediums are going to be significantly lighter. There are a lot of very prominent beekeepers who keep exclusively in medium boxes. Everything is medium across the whole bee yard. Other people think that you should only use mediums as supers. Keep your deeps for the brood, and then if you're adding boxes for honey, you're going to put mediums on top. You can also put deeps on for honey if you think your bees are going to fill them up. Some quick thoughts about frames. So my first beehive that I bought was the Flow Hive, and all over the Flow website they talked about using foundationless frames and going all natural comb. And that is what this is. This is literally just a frame of wood that the bees filled up with comb. They built this comb hanging from the frame. I did add wire to the frame going across the frame. You can actually see it. You can see the wire in there. That's for extra support, so when you tilt the frame, the comb doesn't fall out of the frame. But this is what natural comb looks like, and this is what the bees will build if you let them. It does take a lot more time and a lot more resources for the bees to build this comb. They also can get a little bit sloppy with the size of cells they make and where they build the comb. So I found after a year of dealing with this that I didn't really like it all that much. The other end of the spectrum is a full-on plastic frame. Now this is a plastic frame that will not break. This has the cells formed right into the frame, and that gets the bees started on where to build their comb. These are super easy to use, they're cheap, they're indestructible, they last years and years and years. You can put these in a honey extractor and they will never break. Comb can be scraped off real easily, they can be cleaned. I don't like them at all. I don't like all this plastic in the hive. I inherited a bunch of these frames when I inherited my Italian bees. My neighbor who had these bees was using these frames. I don't really like them. I've slowly gotten them out of my hives and I don't use these anymore. Now, the middle of the road solution is the wooden frame with the preformed plastic foundation. This I like. Now, the foundation is still plastic, but it is coated with wax. The cells are preformed, so the bees do know where to build, and they do a fantastic job of building beautiful comb. They get started and they can build these things out in just a couple of days when they get going. They are very sturdy. These can stand up to an extractor. You don't need wires or any kind of clips for them. I do like that the frames are still wood. It gives a little more of a natural feel. This is what I'm using now. I like this. Second choice would be going natural, but again, comb's very uneven. If you want to be an all-natural beekeeper, by all means, do this. The bees can get a little messy with this, and they tend to build bigger cells, which are more like drone cells, which attract more varroa, I think. So I don't love this solution, but by all means, it is my second choice. There is also the danger of dropping this comb. This I don't like. I don't. That's nice. Solid, not gonna fall out. Still a bit natural. Bees do a good job. They keep everything nice and neat. I got no problem with this. All right, a lot of questions about feeders, and I love the PAIL feeder that goes inside the hive. I get a lot of people suggested that I do open feeding, which is basically a pail or some kind of bucket or barrel or something outside the hive that is sort of in a central location that the bees can go fly to and feed off of. That's not really an option for us because, again, we do live in bear country, and I don't want bears being attracted to this area in any way, and open syrup is just a dinner bell for bears. Of course, there are entrance feeders, and there are internal frame feeders. There are open feeders that go sort of inside the hive, but they kind of sit on top of the hive, and they're open, and the bees have little floaty things they can float on and eat the syrup, and I just generally see drowning bees when I see videos about those. So what I like are the PAIL feeders that get inverted and a vacuum seal forms, and they go inside the hive. I've had 0 leaks, 0 trouble with those feeders now in 2 full seasons. I bought the feeders last year, and they've gone through this entire year so far with no leaks, no problem. There's a link in the description of where I got my feeders. So the main reason I use the PAIL feeders is to keep the scent of the syrup inside the hive. So it's a sealed bucket. There's just a small opening that goes down into the hive so the bees can smell the syrup, but it's not wafting all over the bee yard. The other thing I like about the internal feeder is I can monitor how much each hive takes because I put the gallon of syrup directly in that hive. If I have one hive that's just sucking down syrup and then the other hive next to it isn't taking any syrup, I know that. Even if I had an open feeder inside the bee yard that was protected from bears and that feeder was getting drawn down, I wouldn't know which bees were taking the food. By having the feeders individually in each hive, I can tell what bees are drinking what syrup. One thing I would like to try, my friend Bobby down at Bobby McBee's, he's been putting food coloring in his syrup and then he feeds it to the bees and then he can tell where the bees are putting that syrup in the hive. You just have to look at a frame and you can see the different colored syrup in the cells. By putting the coloring in the syrup, he can monitor where that syrup's going in the hive, and he can tell if the bees are putting syrup up into a super, and he wouldn't want to harvest that honey because it's sugar water and not nectar. So that's something I would like to try. Probably next year I'll give that a shot. So yeah, I love the PAIL feeders. All right, I'm gonna wrap this up with one last question here. I get a lot of questions about the flow hive. Now, if you don't know, I bought the flow hive. That's how I got into beekeeping at the beginning. I still have never used the flow hive. I still own it. I've never used it. A lot of people asking, am I gonna use it? Do I plan to use it? That's gonna be the topic of a whole video. I'm gonna make an entire video about this. But I just wanna answer this question in a way that pertains to this video. Basically, should I buy the flow hive to start beekeeping? And my answer is, you don't have to. Now, this is not a knock on flow hive. I have nothing bad to say about the flow hive. I've seen it working for many people. I just haven't used mine yet. Now, what have I said many times in my comments about people asking, should I buy a flow hive? So the flow hive seems like a really cool product, and I've seen it working on a lot of videos, and it seems amazing. However, to get to the flow part of the flow hive, you still have to learn how to be a beekeeper. And to learn how to be a beekeeper, you have to start off with basically a Langstroth hive and be a Langstroth beekeeper. For the price of a flow hive, you can buy 2 Langstroth hives and 2 packages of bees. If it is your first year and you are thinking about getting into beekeeping, I highly recommend you start with 2 beehives. I started with 1. I wish I had started with 2. When you have 2 hives, not only do you have a backup hive in case something happens to one hive, you've got backup frames, you got backup gear, you can move things around between hives. When one hive is doing something kind of weird, you can kind of look at the other hive, and if that hive's doing something weird, that's probably something normal. If one hive's doing something really weird and the other hive is not, that hive might have a problem. When you have 2 hives, you have instant feedback on what is sort of normal with the bees. So everyone who has asked me, should I start with a flow hive, I tell them basically, take the money you were going to spend on a flow hive and start with 2 regular hives. You can always add the flow supers after you learn how to be a beekeeper. It's very easy to buy the flow hive part of the flow hive all by itself and then put it on your beehive, and then you have a flow hive. Again, I have no problem with the flow hive. I'm glad I bought my flow hive. I hope someday to get it working. I don't regret buying it because I've learned a lot since I bought it. I probably wouldn't have made the leap to get into beekeeping had that product not come across my plate. But knowing what I know now, yes, I probably didn't have to buy it to get started beekeeping. I got a whole other bunch of things I want to say about the flow hive, but from a beginner's perspective, those are my thoughts. All right, that was part 1 of the Q&A. I don't know when the other parts are going to be out, but I do have enough questions for 3 more parts, and I have planned to do them. I don't know when, but they're going to be here when they become finished, or when I even shoot them. I don't know when they're going to be here. But anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something.